Captain Jake Morrison stared at the massive ship floating in the darkness of space. It was bigger than anything he had ever seen before. The metal hull was black and covered with strange symbols that seemed to glow with a faint blue light. His ship, the Huns Horizon, looked like a tiny insect next to this giant. "How old do you think it is?" asked Lieutenant Sophie Davis from her station. She was the ship's engineer and always curious about new technology. "Scans show it's at least 1,000,000 years old," replied Dr. Ben Parker, the team scientist. "Maybe. Older. The materials are unlike anything in our databases." Jake had been exploring space for 15 years. He had seen many strange things, but nothing like this. The ship was completely dead. No power, no life signs, nothing. But it was intact, as if it had been waiting in the darkness for someone to find it. "Sir, I'm detecting some kind of data storage in the central section," said Sophie. "It might still be functional." Jake made his decision quickly. "Prepare a boarding party. We're going inside." 2 hours later, Jake floated through the alien corridors wearing his spacesuit. The ship's artificial gravity was gone, so everything floated freely. The walls were covered with more of those glowing symbols. They seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. Ben worked on a strange console while Sophie examined the ship's technology. "Captain, you need to see this," Ben called out. His voice was excited, but also worried. Jake pushed himself over to where Ben was working. The scientist had connected his portable computer to the alien system. Data was flowing across his screen, faster than Jake could read. "What am I looking at?" Jake asked. "Star maps," Ben said. "Hundreds of them. And they're all showing the locations of ships just like this one." He paused and looked at Jake. "There are dozens of them scattered across the galaxy." Jake felt his heart beat faster. If this technology was 1,000,000 years old, and there were dozens of these ships, it could change everything. Humanity had been part of the Galactic Council for 200 years, but they were always treated like children. The 3 elder races controlled everything. They had better weapons, better ships, and better technology. Humans were allowed to exist, but never to truly compete. "Can you download all of this?" Jake asked. "Already doing it," Sophie said from across the room. "But Captain, there's something else. These aren't just star maps. There are technical specifications, weapon designs, and something that looks like a historical record." Ben's computer beeped as more data appeared. His face went pale as he read. "Captain, according to this, the 3 elder races aren't as old as they claim to be. And they didn't develop their technology on their own." "What do you mean?" "They stole it from a race called the Forerunners. These ships belong to the Forerunners." Ben's hands shook as he continued reading. "The elder races killed them all and took their technology. They've been using it to control the galaxy ever since." Jake stared at the information on the screen. If this was true, everything they knew about galactic history was a lie. The Zephyrians with their energy weapons, the Cathara with their biological sciences, and the Voidborn with their space manipulation had built their empires on murder and theft. "Keep downloading everything," Jake ordered. "We need to get this information back to Earth." The trip home took 3 weeks. Jake spent most of that time studying the data they had recovered. The more he read, the angrier he became. The Forerunners had been a peaceful race of explorers and scientists. They had developed amazing technology and shared it freely with younger species. The elder races had repaid this kindness with genocide. When the Horizon reached Earth, Jake immediately reported to Admiral Lisa Carter at Fleet Command. She was a tough woman who had fought in the border wars with the Centauri pirates. If anyone would understand the importance of this discovery, it would be her. "Show me," she said simply after Jake finished his report. Jake activated the holographic display and showed her the star maps. Dozens of red dots appeared, each one marking the location of a Forerunner ship. Each of these contains technology that could make our ships equal to theirs. Maybe better. Admiral Carter studied the display for a long time. The Council has laws about salvaging pre-civilization technology. Only the elder races are allowed to claim such discoveries. Laws they made to protect their stolen advantage. Jake said, "Admiral, this could change everything. We don't have to be their junior partners anymore." Carter nodded slowly. "I need to take this to the President." President Maria Santos listened to the report in her office, overlooking the Pacific Ocean. She was a former diplomat who had spent years dealing with the elder races. She knew how they thought and how they would react. "If we salvage these ships, they'll consider it an act of rebellion," she said after Admiral Carter finished explaining the situation. "If we don't, we'll never be anything more than their servants." Carter replied, "Madam President, this is our chance to stand as equals in the galaxy." Dr. Alex Rodriguez, Earth's top expert on alien cultures, had been studying the Forerunner data for weeks. He entered the meeting with a grim expression. "I've finished analyzing the historical records," he said. "The elder races have done this before. Every time a younger species gets too advanced, they find a way to destroy them or force them back into submission. They've been maintaining their power for over 1,000,000 years by keeping everyone else weak." President Santos walked to the window and looked out at the ocean. Earth's population was 30 billion people spread across hundreds of worlds. All of them depended on her decisions. "If we take this technology, they'll try to stop us," she said. "If we don't take it, they'll find another way to keep us down," Admiral Carter said. "They always do." The president was quiet for several minutes. When she turned around, her face was set with determination. "Begin salvage operations immediately. Keep them secret for as long as possible. We need time to study the technology and build new ships." "And when they find out?" Dr. Rodriguez asked. "Then we'll face that challenge when it comes," Santos said. "But I won't condemn humanity to eternal servitude just to avoid a fight." 3 months later, the Galactic Council discovered what Earth was doing. A Zephyrian patrol found one of the human salvage operations and immediately reported it to the Council. The response was swift and harsh. The 3 elder races delivered an ultimatum to Earth: surrender all Forerunner technology and reveal the locations of all discovered ships within 30 days, or face severe consequences. President Santos stood before the cameras in her office, knowing that her words would be broadcast across the galaxy. Behind her, through the window, she could see construction ships building humanity's first Forerunner enhanced. "Warships, to the Galactic Council, and all who hear this message," she began. "For 2 centuries, humanity has tried to work within your system. We have followed your laws, respected your authority, and accepted our place as junior members of your galactic order." She paused and looked directly into the camera. "That ends today. You have given us an ultimatum, but you should remember something important about humans. We warned the galaxy we won't hold back when pushed into a corner. You have forced our hand, and now you will see what humans do when we stop holding back." The transmission ended, and the galaxy held its breath. The age of human submission was over. Colonel Ryan Brooks watched as his team cut through the hull of another Forerunner ship. This was the 5th one they had found in the past month. Each ship contained technology that seemed impossible, even by the standards of the elder races. "Be careful with those power cores," he called out to his engineers. "We still don't fully understand how they work." Sophie Davis, now promoted to chief engineer, was directing the salvage operation from inside the alien vessel. She had become the expert on Forerunner technology, spending countless hours studying their designs and trying to understand their principles. "Colonel, you need to see this," Sophie said through the radio. This ship has something the others didn't. Some kind of manufacturing system. Ryan floated through the airlock and into the ship's main bay. The room was enormous, filled with strange machines that hummed with power despite being 1,000,000 years old. In the center was a device that looked like it could build anything imaginable. "It's a matter compiler," Sophie explained, her voice filled with wonder. "It can take raw materials and turn them into anything the computer tells it to make. Ships, weapons, tools, anything." Dr. Ben Parker was studying symbols on the walls nearby. He had become fluent in the Forerunner language over the past few months. According to this, they used these machines to help younger races develop. They would give them the tools they needed to advance peacefully. Ryan felt a chill as he realized the implications. "How many younger races do you think the elder species destroyed?" "Hundreds," Ben said quietly. "Maybe thousands." The Forerunners tried to stop them, but they were outnumbered. In the end, even their advanced technology couldn't save them. Back on Earth, Admiral Lisa Carter was dealing with the first signs of the elder race's response. Trade ships from human colonies were being turned away from alien ports. Diplomatic messages were becoming increasingly hostile. The galaxy was choosing sides, and most were siding with the elder races out of fear. "Admiral, we're receiving reports of attacks on our outer colonies," reported Captain Amy Foster, one of Carter's most trusted officers. 3 Kithara bioships attacked the farming world of New Eden. They released some kind of organism that's killing all the crops. Carter clenched her fists. The elder races weren't waiting for the 30-day deadline. They were already starting their campaign to force humanity back into submission. "What about our new ships?" Carter asked. "Are any of them ready for combat?" "The UNS Defiance just finished its trials," Foster replied. "It's not fully equipped yet, but it has some of the new Forerunner weapon systems." Carter made her decision quickly. "Take the Defiance to New Eden. See if our new technology can do something." About this biological attack, Captain Foster had never commanded a ship with Forerunner technology before. As the Defiance approached New Eden, she could see the damage the Kithara had done. The planet's surface was covered with a gray substance that was spreading like a disease, killing everything it touched. "Scans show the contamination is biological in nature," reported her science officer, Lieutenant Danny Wright. "It's designed to break down plant matter and convert it into something the Kithara can use as food." "What about the colonists?" "They've evacuated to the orbital stations, but if we can't stop this, they'll lose everything." Foster studied the readouts from her new weapon systems. The Forerunner technology was incredibly advanced, but it was also completely different from anything humans had used before. She would have to trust that Sophie Davis and her team had understood it correctly. "Target the contaminated areas," Foster ordered. "Fire the biorestoration beam." The Defiance's new weapon was unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. Instead of destroying, it rebuilt. The beam swept across the planet's surface, and wherever it touched, the gray contamination began to dissolve. In its place, new plant. Life began to grow at an incredible rate. "It's working," Wright reported with amazement. "The contamination is being reversed. The planet is healing itself." But Foster's celebration was cut short when 3 Kithara bioships emerged from hyperspace. They were massive creatures that had been bred for war, covered in weapons that could devastate entire worlds. "They're scanning us," Wright said. "I think they're trying to figure out how we stopped their weapon." The lead bioship fired a stream of acid that could melt through any known armor. Foster watched in fascination as her ship's new shields not only blocked the attack, but absorbed its energy, making the Defiance stronger. "Return fire," Foster ordered. The Defiance's weapons were based on Forerunner principles of harmony and balance. Instead of simply destroying the bioships, they disrupted the artificial modifications the Kithara had made. returning the creatures to their original peaceful nature. The three bioships stopped attacking and began floating quietly in space. Foster realized they were no longer weapons, but simply large space-dwelling animals that had been forced to fight. "Send a message to Fleet Command," Foster told Wright. "Tell them our new technology works. And tell them the Cathara won't be expecting this." On Earth, Dr. Alex Rodriguez was making disturbing discoveries in the Forerunner archives. He had found records of the elder race's methods for controlling younger species. It wasn't just military conquest. They had been systematically draining energy from star systems across the galaxy. "They've built a network," Rodriguez explained to President Santos during an emergency meeting. "Thousands of energy collectors hidden throughout space. They steal power from stars and redirect it to their own worlds. That's why so many younger species struggle to develop advanced technology. They literally don't have enough energy." President Santos felt sick as she understood the full scope of the elder race's crimes. "How long has this been going on?" "Over 1,000,000 years, Rodriguez said. "Every time a species gets close to discovering the truth, the elder races find a way to eliminate them." Admiral Carter entered the meeting with news from the front lines. "The attacks are escalating. The Zephyrians are using energy weapons to destabilize entire star systems. The Voidborn are trapping our ships in temporal fields, aging them decades in minutes." "But our new ships are holding their own?" Santos asked. "Better than holding their own," Carter said with a grim smile. "Captain Foster's success at New Eden has inspired other colonies to fight back. The word is spreading that we can actually stand up to them." Santos looked at the holographic display showing the galaxy. Red zones marked areas under elder race control, blue zones showed human territory, and green zones indicated worlds that were beginning to rebel against their oppressors. "How many of the younger species know the truth now?" she asked. 17 species have received our data packets," Rodriguez said. "The Saurians have already declared independence from the Council. The Delphins are organizing a resistance movement. In the Outer Rim," Carter added more good news. "Our salvage operations have recovered enough Forerunner technology to build a proper fleet. The shipyards are working around the clock." Santos nodded. The situation was dangerous, but for the first time in centuries, humanity and the other younger species had hope. "Admiral, prepare for full-scale war," Santos ordered. "If the elder races want to fight, we'll give them one. But this time, we're not fighting alone." Across the galaxy, the younger species were rising up. The Rockborn were using their natural abilities to hide Forerunner ships in asteroid fields. The Saurians were sharing their warrior traditions with human military advisors. The Delphins were using their deep space knowledge to guide human fleets through dangerous regions. The age of elder race dominance was ending, but the cost of freedom would be measured in entire worlds. General Patricia Hayes stood on the bridge of the Unzaz Liberation, watching as enemy ships filled the space around her. The Zephyrian fleet had arrived with over 200 vessels, each one crackling with deadly energy weapons. Behind them came the Cathara swarm ships, living creatures bred for war and destruction. "Enemy ships are charging their weapons," reported Commander Steve Collins from his tactical station. "They're preparing to fire on the civilian transports." Hayes looked at the refugee ships trying to escape from the colony world below. Thousands of families were fleeing as the elder races punished anyone who supported the human rebellion. She would not let them die. "All ships, attack formation," Hayes ordered. "Protect those transports at all costs." The battle began with a flash of light that could be seen from orbit. Zephyrian energy beams lashed out at the human fleet, but the new Forerunner shields held strong. The energy that should have destroyed human ships was instead absorbed and redirected back at the attackers. Nina Bell was piloting one of the new fighter craft when she saw something that made her heart stop. A massive void-borne ship was appearing out of nowhere, using their space-bending technology to strike without warning. "General, we have a problem," Bell reported. "The void-born are here, and they're doing something to our ships." Hayes watched in horror as several human vessels began to age rapidly. The void-born temporal weapons were accelerating time around their targets, turning new ships into ancient hulks in seconds. Crews were dying of old age in minutes. "All ships retreat to minimum safe distance," Hayes ordered. But she knew it might already be too late for some of her people. Commander Collins had an idea. He had been studying Forerunner technology for months and remembered something about their temporal research. "General, what if we can reverse their own weapon against them?" "Explain quickly," Hayes said as another human ship aged into dust. "The Forerunners developed temporal shields," Collins said, working frantically at his console. "If I can modify our systems, we might be able to reflect their time weapons back at them." Hayes gave him permission to try. Collins worked with engineer Chris Morgan to reprogram the ship's defenses. It was dangerous work. One mistake could age the entire crew to death. "Ready," Collins announced. "But I need to get close to that void-born ship to make it work." Hayes looked at her tactical display. The void-born vessel was surrounded by smaller ships, all of them protected by the same temporal field that was killing her people. It would be a suicide mission. "I'll do it," Collins said before Hayes could speak. "My family died when the Cathara attacked Earth Colony 7. This is for them." Collins took a fighter and flew directly at the void-born ship. Enemy fire surrounded him, but he kept going. Just as the temporal weapon began to affect his ship, he activated the reversed field. The effect was immediate and devastating. The void-born ship's own temporal weapon turned against it, aging the ancient vessel beyond its ability to survive. The ship cracked apart as centuries passed in seconds, taking its temporal field with it. Collins's ship was also caught in the effect. His last transmission was simple: for humanity. The loss of Collins and his heroic sacrifice turned the tide of the battle. The void-born fleet retreated in confusion, while the human ships pressed their attack against the remaining Zephyrian and Cathara forces. Dr. Elena Martinez was working in her laboratory on Earth when the news of the victory arrived. She had been studying Forerunner consciousness technology, trying to understand how they had coordinated their vast civilization. What she discovered changed everything. "Admiral Carter, you need to see this," Martinez called when the Admiral visited her lab. The Forerunners had developed a way to link minds across space. Instant communication over any distance. Carter studied the alien device Martinez had reconstructed. It looked like a simple headband, but the technology inside was incredibly complex. "If our fleet commanders could communicate instantly, we could coordinate attacks across the entire galaxy," Carter realized. "More than that," Martinez said excitedly. "We could share knowledge, tactics, even emotions. Imagine a battle where every ship captain knows exactly what every other captain is thinking and planning." Carter authorized immediate testing of the technology. Within days, human fleet commanders across the galaxy were linked by the Forerunner Consciousness Network. The effect on their military capabilities was extraordinary. Captain Jake Morrison, now commanding the massive battleship Un's Retribution, felt the connection activate for the first time during a battle with Zephyrian forces. Suddenly, he could sense the thoughts and intentions of every other human commander in the fight. They moved as one mind, controlling hundreds of ships. The Zephyrians had never faced anything like it. Their individual ship commanders, no matter how skilled, could not compete with the coordinated response of the human fleet. Within hours, the human forces had captured the Zephyrian energy collection station that had been draining power from 12 star systems. Sophie Davis led the team that studied the captured station. What they found was even worse than they had imagined. The energy collectors were not just stealing power from stars. They were slowly killing the stars themselves, shortening their lives by millions of years. This network has been destroying entire solar systems, Davis reported to Admiral Carter. Billions of worlds have died because their stars burned out too early. Carter felt rage building inside her. The elder races had committed genocide on a scale that was almost impossible to understand. Not just killing people, but killing entire worlds and all the life that might have evolved on them. Can we reverse it? Carter asked. The Forerunner. Technology can restore the stolen energy, Davis said. But we would need to capture the main control center. According to these records, it's located in the Zephyrian home system. Carter smiled grimly. Then that's where we're going. The assault on the Zephyrian home system began with the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled. Ships from dozens of younger species joined the attack. Saurian warriors fought alongside human marines. Delphin pilots guided ships through the dangerous space around the Zephyrian homeworld. Rock-born engineers provided their expertise with the capture of the energy network. The battle was fierce. The Zephyrians fought desperately to protect their stolen power source, knowing that without it, their civilization would collapse. They used weapons that could shatter planets and energy fields that could boil space itself, but they could not stand against the combined fury of all the species they had oppressed. Captain Morrison led the final assault on the control center, fighting through layers of defenses that had protected the Zephyrian secret for 1,000,000 years. When the control center finally fell, the effect was immediate. Across the galaxy, energy began flowing back to the star systems that had been drained for so long. Dead worlds suddenly had power again. Struggling civilizations found themselves with abundant resources. The Zephyrian fleet, cut off from their stolen energy, began to drift powerlessly in space. Their weapons went silent. Their ships became mere metal shells floating in the darkness. Admiral Carter received the surrender of the Zephyrian High Command. 3 days later, the eldest and most powerful of the 3 ruling species had been brought to their knees by the species they had tried to keep as servants. But the war was not over. The Cathara were still fighting, using their biological weapons to devastate any world that opposed them. And somewhere in the dark spaces between galaxies, the Voidborn were planning their revenge. Dr. Alex Rodriguez watched the readings on his screen with growing alarm. The Cathara had released something new into space, and it was spreading faster than anything they had seen before. This was not just another biological weapon. This was something designed to kill everything that was not Cathara. "How long do we have?" asked President Maria Santos, who had come to the laboratory as soon as she heard the news. "Based on the spread rate, it will reach Earth in 6 days," Rodriguez said. "Every world it touches becomes completely lifeless within hours. Plants, animals, people, everything dies." Santos felt the weight of billions of lives on her shoulders. The war had been going well. The Zephyrians had surrendered after losing their energy network. Many Cathara worlds had stopped fighting. But now the remaining Cathara leaders had decided that if they could not rule the galaxy, they would destroy it instead. "What about the Forerunner archives?" Santos asked. "Is there anything that can help us?" Rodriguez had been searching through the ancient records for days. "There is something. The Forerunners faced a similar plague during their war with the elder races. They developed a counteragent, but the process is complex." Admiral Lisa Carter entered the room with urgent news. "Madam President, we have bigger problems. Our scouts report that the Voidborn are massing a huge fleet in dark space. They're planning something." Santos looked at the holographic display showing the galaxy. Red zones marked areas where the Cathara plague was spreading. Blue zones showed human and allied territory. And now there were purple zones where Voidborn ships were gathering like storm clouds. They're waiting, Carter explained. They want the plague to weaken us before they attack. Dr. Elena Martinez burst into the room carrying a datapad. I think I know what the Voidborn are planning. I've been monitoring their communications, and they're talking about something called the Great Reset. What does that mean? Santos asked. They want to use their temporal technology to reverse time across the entire galaxy, Martinez said. Take everything back to the way it was 1,000,000 years ago, before the younger species evolved. The room fell silent as everyone understood what this meant. The Voidborn were not just planning to kill everyone. They wanted to erase entire species from history, as if they had never existed at all. How is that possible? Carter asked. The Forerunner records mention something called temporal anchors, Rodriguez said, checking his data. Massive devices that can affect time across vast distances. If the Voidborn have built something like that. Santos made her decision quickly. We stop the plague first, and we deal with the Voidborn. Dr. Rodriguez, how do we make this counteragent? We need biological samples from every species the Forerunners helped, Rodriguez explained. Counteragent has to be tailored to protect all life, not just human life. Captain Amy Foster was given the dangerous mission of collecting samples from plague-infected worlds. She took the fastest ship in the fleet and traveled to 12 different systems, landing on planets where death was spreading like wildfire. On each world, Foster and her team had to work quickly. The plague would kill them if they stayed too long, even with their protective suits. But they managed to collect samples from hundreds of different species before their time ran out. Meanwhile, Captain Jake Morrison was leading a desperate attack on the Kithara homeworld. The source of the plague had to be destroyed before Rodriguez could release his counteragent, or the cure would just be overwhelmed by new waves of the disease. The battle around the Kithara homeworld was unlike anything Morrison had ever seen. The planet itself was alive, covered with defensive organisms that attacked anything that came close. The space around it was filled with bioships that fought like wild animals. Target the plague production facilities, Morrison ordered his fleet. Use the biorestoration weapons. The Forerunner weapons were designed to heal rather than destroy, but Morrison had learned that healing could be a powerful weapon against creatures that had been changed by war. The biorestoration beams struck the Kithara facilities and began reversing the artificial modifications that made the plague so deadly. On the planet below, Morrison could see the changes happening. The plague production centers were transforming back into the peaceful research facilities they had been before the war. The Kithara themselves were changing too, becoming less aggressive as their warlike modifications faded away. Back on Earth, Rodriguez was working frantically to complete the counteragent. The biological samples from Foster's mission were being processed by Forerunner biocomputers that could analyze genetic codes faster than any human technology. It's working, Rodriguez announced as the final formula appeared on his screen. But we need to distribute it across the entire galaxy in less than 3 days, or the plague will spread too far to stop. Sophie Davis had been preparing for this moment. She had modified hundreds of human ships with Forerunner matter compilers that could produce the counteragent in massive quantities. Now those ships launched from Earth and allied worlds, racing to reach plague-infected systems before it was too late. The counteragent worked exactly as the Forerunners had designed it. Wherever it was released, the plague stopped spreading and began to dissolve. Dead worlds started to show signs of life again as the biorestoration effects took hold. But even as the plague crisis ended, the Voidborn were beginning their final attack. Their fleet emerged from dark space near the galactic core, heading for the ancient temporal anchors that could reset time across the galaxy. Admiral Carter led the combined fleets of humanity and its allies in a desperate race to stop them. The battle took place near the galactic center, where space itself was twisted by the massive black hole at the galaxy's heart. The Voidborn ships were like nothing anyone had seen before. They could appear and disappear at will, attack from multiple timelines at once, and seemed immune to most weapons. But they had one weakness that the Forerunners had discovered long ago. Fire the temporal stabilizers. Carter ordered her fleet. The Forerunner weapons created fields of stable time around the void-born ships, preventing them from jumping between timelines. Suddenly, the mysterious enemy became vulnerable to conventional weapons. The final battle was brief but intense. Caught in stable time, the Voidborn fought with the desperation of a species facing extinction. But they were outnumbered and outgunned by the alliance of younger species that had united against oppression. When the last Voidborn ship was destroyed, their commander sent a final message across space. You have won this time, but the universe is vast, and time is long. Others like us will come. President Santos stood before the representatives of hundreds of worlds in the new Galactic Assembly. The old council building had been replaced by a structure that welcomed all species equally, with no special privileges for the eldest or most powerful. We did not seek this war, Santos said to the assembled delegates. We only wanted to live free and explore the stars in peace. But when we were forced to choose between slavery and freedom, we chose freedom. She looked out at the mixed crowd of humans, saurians, delphins, rockborn, and even former enemies who had joined the alliance. The Forerunners left us their technology, not so we could dominate others, but so we could protect ourselves and help others do the same. The Assembly voted unanimously to open the Forerunner archives to all member species. The technology that had been hoarded by the elder races for 1,000,000 years was now freely available to anyone who wanted to learn. Admiral Morrison, now in charge of galactic exploration, prepared to launch the largest expedition in history. Ships from dozens of species would travel to the edge of the galaxy and beyond, searching for new worlds and new forms of life. On the bridge of the UNS Explorer, Morrison's daughter Kate looked out at the stars with wonder. The galaxy was vast, full of mysteries waiting to be discovered. And for the first time in 1,000,000 years, all species were free to explore it together. The elder races had tried to keep the galaxy locked in the past, but the future belonged to those brave enough to reach for it. Earth had warned the galaxy that humans would not hold back, and that warning had become a promise of hope for everyone who dreamed of freedom among the stars.